Hello gamers! Welcome to my channel. Since I started playing this wonderful game, I have learned a few things, often the hard way, that might help new players in their campaigns, so I thought I would share them here. Without further ado, here are my top 5 tips for winning the strategic and diplomacy layer of Airships Conquer the Skies. Number 5. Salvaging something from nothing. If you are about to lose a town or city to an incoming enemy fleet because you do not have the force to take it back immediately or defend the town, consider ceding it to a neighboring faction in exchange for another town, gold, tribute, or treaties. Better to get something back for it than lose it for nothing. For example, here we have an incoming enemy fleet from Monopolis to Salvaging. Now if I did not have this fleet here to defend it, and I didn't have any fleets around that would be close enough to make a good defense of the town, I could trade it to a neighboring faction. So for example, I could contact Somerton here, make an offer of the town, and then demand another town, say for example Harsmouth here, or Tis. And we could effectively trade our town Salvaging for Tis. And if we did that, then Salvaging would become Somerton's and Tis would become ours, and this fleet would have no place to go but return back home to Monopolis. Hence, better to get something back for a town than lose it for nothing. Number 4. Use non-aggression treaties and defensive pacts to extend the range of your fleets so that you can reach otherwise unreachable targets like monster lairs or enemy towns. For example, here the boomer is in Thulu, and it doesn't have quite enough range to reach these giant bees way up north. But we have a defensive pact with Rizagot, so we can actually send the boomer to Rizagot for resupply. And eventually, when the boomer reaches Rizagot in a few short moments here, it will be able to resupply and then attack the giant bees, giving you an opportunity to gain some much needed wealth. See, it can now reach the giant bees. Speaking of which, number 3, prioritize taking out monster nests. Taking out an early monster lair can finance your economy or your military force in the early game. Here, the boomer can take out the giant bees. In another game, taking out a giant bee's nest like this netted me 8,000 gold in the very early game, which helped finance the building of the economy. Number 2. Speak softly. Think twice before issuing ultimatums. Check the Diplomacy tab to see if your target has a defensive pact or an alliance with a faction you already have a defensive pact or alliance with. If you declare war on a faction that has a defensive pact with a faction that you also have a defensive pact with, you may suffer large reputation penalties for following through on your ultimatum. For example, if we were to make an ultimatum to Eisenmar could, even though they don't have currently a defensive pact or an alliance treaty, they could, in the time frame of between answering our ultimatum, they could reach out to Rizagot and form a defensive pact with Rizagot. And if they did that, then we would have a defensive pact with Rizagot, and Eisenmar would also have a defensive pact with Rizagot, And then in that instance, they could refuse our ultimatum, and then we would be put in a tough pickle of a situation where we could back down on our ultimatum and lose 6 rep, or follow through on our threat and lose a much more substantial amount of reputation. So always think twice before issuing ultimatums. The vice versa is also true, which is if the AI or another faction issues you an ultimatum, you can also go ahead in the time that the timer ticks down for having to respond to the ultimatum. You can reach out to other factions that may have a defensive pact or an alliance or a non-aggression treaty with the threatening AI faction and obtain a defensive pact or a non-aggression treaty or an alliance, which then would make it more unlikely or pretty unlikely that the threatening faction will follow through on their ultimatum. And number 1, but always carry a big stick. Maintain a strong military force so that you can negotiate from a position of strength. Periodically check the diplomacy tab and see if you can negotiate with AI factions that are under some sort of duress, like facing multiple wars on multiple fronts. For example, here, Rodino is much weaker than us, and it's facing wars with 5 other factions. They're so much weaker than us and so desperate for peace with us that they would agree to a non-aggression pact in exchange for either of these 2 towns, New York or Gloru Owasi. Good deals can be had if you check the diplomacy tab for opportunities like this to negotiate from strength. And there you have it, my top 5 tips for winning the strategic and diplomatic layer in Airships Conquer the Skies. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this content, please hit the like button, comment, or subscribe. Take care and see you in the next one.